Good evening. I was facilitating a workshop recently with grade 7s. For those of you my age amongst us, that's the old standard 5, 12-year-olds. And the theme of the workshop was friendship. And we were asking them to define what is a friend. The one child says, a friend is somebody who sees me, who really sees me. And I'd like to think that that's exactly what a friend is. And there's something extraordinary about friends who go into war together, who discover each other on a battlefield, who see each other for who they really are, at their most gloriously deluded and their most truthfully pathetic, their most cowardly and their most courageous. In that kind of friendship, there's something more than camaraderie, mutual reliance and commitment to defending each other. There is an irreplaceable sense that you saw me. No one else can ever understand what it was like to be there. But you were there, and you saw me, and I saw you. We may not be able to put it into words, but you are my witness, and I am yours. And we can bear that memory together. It's all the more painful then when the witness to your joy and pain, to your shared battlefield, is lost on that battlefield. Nothing can replace that witness. No memorial, no medal, no story of bravery and winning the day, no newspaper headline or national holiday. All other memories are incomplete and inadequate, and are sometimes even distorted, wild speculations and propaganda. Paul Emmanuel's The Lost Men series is about men who have fallen in battlefields. The works are temporary installations on specific battlefields. In the process, a selection of the names of the fallen, the lost men, are pressed into Paul's skin. These painful marks, these symbolic wounds, are then photographed before the names fade. The photographs are then printed onto fragile, semi-transparent silk banners, and the banners are suspended in the battlefield as an almost insubstantial act of memorialization. You can see alongside me over here the 2004 project, The Lost Men Grahamstown, where names of those in the Makana Wars were represented. And just over there are some images from The Lost Men Mozambique in 2007, which dealt with the Frelimo-Renamo Civil War. And in 2014, The Lost Men France, which was selected by the government of France as an official event on the World War I centenary program. The Lost Men series does not aim to glorify war. It's a kind of anti-memorial, an anti-monument that aims to ask critical questions about the nature of our collective memory of conflict, the commemoration of traditionally masculine acts of violence, and the valorization of the male body. In The Lost Men France, the images of Paul's skin on the banners showed the names of a selection of French, German, South African, and other Commonwealth servicemen who fell on the Western Front. Their names exist alongside one another without reference to their rank, nationality, or ethnicity, a shared skin, as it were. The Lost Men France was installed on a farm road leading to the Thiepval Memorial, close to Delville Wood, where thousands of South African servicemen died. By including the names of black South African servicemen, the Lost Men France questioned the exclusion of these names from the walls of the Thiepval Memorial. One of the many characteristics of memory is that it is selective. Its silences are as significant as its assertions. Unlike the imposing marble of Thiepval, the banners lining the road were not a vast ritual monolith of stone and mortar, but rather inadequate representations of the male body as something fragile, vulnerable, and impermanent. The banners lined the road like flags, welcoming visitors to some event that has been branded as international, but instead of national symbols, the flags bear images of a bruised body. Left to the elements, the banners were beaten, faded, torn, and eroded. This is an exhibition of the remnants of an exhibition, not unlike the memories of war. The body bags bearing the few fragmented body parts that could be found, the artifacts of a battlefield that researchers use in their attempts to reconstruct history, the relics of martyred saints presented by priests to inspire the faithful in their suffering. Remnants of an already tenuous and inevitably failed attempt to remember. When I look at these remnants of the banners and recall Paul's poignant photographs and footage, which you can see on the film at the back, of these banners wafting above fields of wheat during harvest time, I'm reminded of the song Strange Fruit, with all its bodies swaying in the breeze. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is a strange and bitter crop. It's actually a song about the violent racism of the American South, but it could have been a song about black South Africans who went to war in 1916. At a time when we in South Africa are questioning how we represent ourselves on the international stage, it's worthwhile to remember the motives behind their strategy and its outcome. The 1913 Natives Land Act forced black people off the land and restricted black land ownership to reserves. Only 7.3% of South Africa's land could be owned by blacks, who made up 2/3 of the population. This restriction on land ownership forced African men and women to seek work on white mines, farms, and factories. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 was seen by many black leaders as an opportunity to show loyalty to the British Empire in the hope that this would be reciprocated with sympathy for their opposition to the Natives Land Act. The Union of South Africa was still a dominion of the British Crown, and its government could still be influenced by British opinions. The South African Native National Congress, which had only been established in 1912 and was renamed the African National Congress in 1923, used this rationale to endorse the deployment of black South African volunteers as part of the Allied war effort. 83,000 Africans and 2,000 coloured men served as non-combatants, first as the South African Labour Corps in Africa and the Middle East, and then as the South African Native Labour Contingent in Europe. The story of the men who died when the SS Mendi collided with SS Darrow off the Isle of Wight on 21 February 1917 is very well known. But there are many more forgotten stories of black South Africans, lost men who fell as part of the war on the Western Front. The South African native labour contingents were mainly used to load and unload munitions and supplies in French ports, build roads, repair railways, quarry stone and clear forests. Later in the war, some units were actually taken to the battlefront, but they were mostly kept near French ports and in compounds that instructions for the construction of these compounds stated prevented all familiarity between Europeans and natives. They could not move without a pass and an escort. This rule was based on the fear that uninhibited contact with Europeans would undermine the existing racial hierarchy in South Africa. German planes regularly attacked the compounds. They had no weapons with which to defend themselves. The total loss of life in the South African native labour contingent in Europe amounts to about 1,120 men. 260 of them rest in the Ark le Bataille British cemetery near Dieppe, where most had died in the number 1 General Labour Hospital there. The cemetery contains a stone memorial to them on which the following words are inscribed in English, Sesotho, and isiXhosa. To the memory of those natives of the South African Labour Corps, they actually get the name wrong, who crossed the seas in response to the call of their great chief, King George V, and lay down their lives in France for the British Empire during the Great War, 1914 to 1918. This memorial is erected by their comrades. When those who had survived the war, survived the terrible toll of frostbite, because they were never given proper clothing, survived the violent suppression of protests against compound conditions, during which quite a few had been shot by white South African officers, survived the scourge of tuberculosis, survived attacks by the German planes, returned to South Africa. Not only were they denied medals, they also failed to get Britain's support against the Natives Land Act. Around us tonight are remnants of images in which Paul is clutching his body, trying to protect it from some impact, some anticipated harm. But this is the aftermath, and he's failed to keep the body whole. The way his body is lit in these photographs emphasizes its softness and its vulnerability, conventionally associated with the feminine form. These are not the hard, angular, muscular body images that we see in statues of the unknown soldier. If we only represent in the forms that are already endorsed and perpetuated by authority, patriarchy, and tradition, forms that are carved into stone, we will not find new ways of thinking about and talking about violence and justice and what it means to be a man. The battlefield that we have to fight on today is largely society's dangerous constructions of masculinity, sexuality, and ethnicity. We have to hold the memories of those who have fallen on these battlefields close to us, just as these works do. We have to carry the names of those who have been abused and neglected and raped, murdered, excluded, and dehumanized. We have to carry them in our bodies as a true expression of our sense of loss and mourning. We need to bear those names like raw wounds on our skin, whatever color of inherited skin we like to imagine we are in. We've all lost friends on battlefields. We've lost friends to the struggle, to political assassinations, to conflicts all through Africa, to HIV, to cancer and other diseases, to crimes of violence, to suicide, which currently claims 3 times the number of people who die in war, to substance abuse, to road accidents, to neglect, and perhaps saddest of all, to the loss of memory. Who are you when there's no one left to remember you? No one left to visit your grave? These are the lost men, women, and children. In the violent trenches of the Western Front, explosives churned the land and bodies into mud in a way that warfare had never done before. Bones are still scattered in these landscapes. In his book, The Making of a Mind, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin speaks about what it was like to be in those trenches in the First World War. He says, "Only the image of the crucified can sum up, express, and relieve all the horror and beauty, all the hope and the deep mystery in such an avalanche of conflict and sorrows. As I looked at the scene of bitter toil, I felt completely overcome by the thought that I had the honor of standing at one of the 2 or 3 spots on which at this very moment the whole life of the universe surges and ebbs, places of pain, but it is there that a great future, and this I believe more and more, is taking shape. One also sees emerge from within one an underlying stream of clarity, energy, and freedom that is to be found hardly anywhere else in ordinary life. Paul Emmanuel, it has been an inexplicable and incomprehensible privilege that you have allowed me to witness your journey across so many battlefields. Those who weren't there can't really know all that my congratulations mean. Congratulations, my friend.